Okay, so today we are talking to another practitioner. Her name is Katharine Daniels. She is an Access Bars practitioner and Holy Fire Reiki master, and is just an all-around great soul. So I just wanted to introduce Katharine. And honestly, I don't know a whole lot about your backstory or how you found energy medicine, how you found Access Bars. So kind
Yeah.
of tell me part of your story, please.
Yeah, actually that's a great way to start. So I came into a lot of the energy work. I wasn't familiar with it. I didn't grow up with this stuff. What I did grow up with was a lot of mm, like, well, let me just put it this way. I had PTSD, and that was originally how I found Reiki. And Reiki was kind of one of the first things that I tried, and I didn't try it until I was like, okay, I feel like I have no other, like what I'm doing is not working, like it's not
Mhm.
changing the thing. And I went and had a Reiki session done, and just in one session, there was so much that changed. I remember after the session, like just sitting in my car, and I was like, wow, this can be, you know, if this kind of change can be in my world and this kind of relaxation can be in my world, I just didn't know, like, that was a possibility for me. Um, I started to receive more Reiki sessions and do like personal development, growth and healing. And the more that I delved into that, the more that I kind of began to see there's certain areas of my life where I had these like patterns that I was on, and like
Mm.
things were like repeating, things with like relationship and things with like money, where it was just like, um, you know, kind of like you're on a hamster wheel with certain things. And it was just like, wow, this is not so much fun. And a friend of mine at the time was like, hey, I'm doing this thing called the Access Bars. Do you want to come try it? And I went and had a session, and it was like, I was like, wow, it's kind of like, when you walk down a hallway and you're just like, the doors are closed and you're just like walking through there. And then like after the session, I'm like walking down the same hallway. And yet it's like, oh, there's a possibility here. There's one here. There's one here. And it's just like, wow, like all of this stuff is here the whole time. But it's just kind of like, we have like these blinders on to seeing the possibilities that can be. Um, as soon as that happened and I began to see some possibilities, it was like, well, why don't I work at the Reiki Center? Why don't I ask them? Like, and that was what opened the door actually to me working at the Reiki Center, because I was like, I never thought it was a possibility for me. And then when I asked and was willing to, step into more of me, then it was like, yeah, Um,
That's
so
pretty profound. I like it.
yeah, yeah. But it's just one of those things of like, our journey takes us in all sorts of directions, right? And it's just a matter of, stepping into more of ourselves. It's in, creating something greater than what we created yesterday. And it's really truly just, what if these things that happen in our lives, like, all this like, trauma and drama and the things that I, had that I was carrying around, what if those things didn't have to be something that stopped me as a stumbling block? What if it was actually a stepping stone into my future? And when I began to really receive that, which is what I believe happened in my first Reiki session, was actually like receiving that, hey, like there's nothing wrong with you. That's actually a strongness, and you can step into something greater. I was like, ah, where has this been my whole life?
Well, and it goes back to like before we started to record, we were talking about the programming that we've allowed and the patterns that we continue to allow, and kind of how do you step out of that? And for me, having had a session or two with you, it's been really interesting to see how you ask certain questions, how you allow your intuition, so you get out of your own way and just trust what's coming in to express and guide a session. So I've got a question. When you were at the very beginning between Reiki and Access Bars, how was like how did you find it different? I Because it to me it's a very different session, Access Bars from Reiki. How did you perceive the difference when you started?
The difference between Reiki and
Access
other,
Bars.
access bars.
Yeah.
Um,
Or
I would
wasn't there a difference for you?
Well, the thing is that like for me, when I look back on it, there was a marked difference, but I don't know that I can put it in words. It's,
Mm,
for me, there's, and I want to be careful in comparing because I kind of feel like that all of this has its space and all of it has a way that it can contribute to ourselves and our bodies. And so it's a matter of, for me, even today, like if I have something happening with my body, I'm like, okay, what would it take to change this? And then it's like there's sometimes that a certain practitioner will pop, and then there's other times that it's like, go and get this modality in particular. So there's sometimes that it's like, going and getting Reiki is what is going to change the thing. For me and PTSD, that's what it was. But then there's other times, that perhaps you have something that you are like, I don't know, for me, what popped, with receiving access bars was, hey, you can change those patterns that you have created in your life. And I was like, okay, cool. Um, I want to throw this out there too, because there's has been some times where it's like I ask my body, okay, what is it going to take to change this? And I get a certain practitioner that'll pop in my mind. And then I have like so much resistance and I'm like, oh, like it's so interesting because there was a while actually where I really resisted going and receiving a session from Joseph at the Reiki Center. And I was
wow.
like, what is this resistance? Why am I doing this? And I was like, I kept hearing like, go see Joseph. And I'm like, but I want to go see Joseph because it was just like this like thing. And every time I would go to the Reiki Center, I'd be in the office and I would like cross paths with him. And I'm like, what is this? I keep running across him. Like, it's like, hi, Joseph. I finally went and had a session with him and it was like so much changed. And that's the thing is that, there's a lot of times like, when we have a lot of resistance to going and receiving a session, or we're like, oh, it's the price or whatever, what if you can move beyond that and go into like, I'm investing in me, I'm choosing this. And so
Mhm.
for me, when all of that stuff was coming up with Joseph, it was a matter of like looking at I'm extremely uncomfortable with what's about to change in this session. I'm
Interesting.
extremely uncomfortable with it.
That's an
But
interesting, because it's funny though. I kind of had the same feeling, but not, you've really articulated that well. That yeah, that's probably what it was because a lot happened. It was an amazing session. I still remember the details of it. He's,
yeah.
he's he's a powerful guy. He's an amazing conduit.
Yeah, and for me, I find that sometimes I have things like that where it could be a particular modality, it could be a particular, person, but it's almost like the more resistance that we have, that can be information. It doesn't mean that you should or shouldn't go get that session. It's just information, right? That intensity was a matter of like, wow, I'm aware that a lot's going to change in this session, and I really had to look at, am I ready to choose that? So it's kind of like even if I'm crossing paths with in this example Joseph all the time, you know until I was willing to be like, what, I'm choosing it even if it's uncomfortable. It's yeah. Even with access bars, I remember like going to expos, prior to my friend offering sessions, and I would go to expos and I would be like, ah, I don't, the bars, literally, I would walk past like all of these, different practitioners offering it, and I just never received it. It
Mm,
wasn't until, it really jumped into my world and was like, yes, this is the thing, do it.
I like
Um,
it. How has
yeah.
your practice evolved over time? I mean, I know that you've worked on yourself, and that's another question. Just what do you do for you? But
Mm.
I think you kind of answered that. But how have you, as a practitioner, evolved over the last few years?
Yeah, that's been interesting. I think the biggest thing is just stepping into more of me. This started out like I wanted to solve a problem, and
Yeah,
it was PTSD, and that was the block in my life. And I also wanted to look at, changing, I have an addiction history, and I wanted to take a look at changing a lot of those things that I was stopping myself with, places where I didn't find myself worthy, or places that I just didn't feel like I belonged or was, I don't know, there's a lot of things there.
right, right, right. All the programming. Yep, it's
Yeah,
it's
there's a
it's a
lot.
thing. It's a thing.
Um, So I think it started with like a lot of fixing, and then it began to shift into like, how can I have more of me, and really like turning up some of my abilities and really becoming more and more of like, what did I come here to do?
Yeah.
Who am I? What's my place here? What's my role? And what do I want to choose? What's fun for me? And so, in stepping into more and more of that, I'm finding that my role is changing. Like, and even like, from stepping into like being a practitioner to, facilitating classes. That was a huge jump for me because I was like terrified of like speaking in front of people. And I still have hints of that, but I'm willing to step into it anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So do you, in your sessions, do you kind of combine everything? Do you use, I know, again, you've worked on opening your intuition and learning how to ask the right questions, or do you kind of combine the access bars and the Reiki at some point? Is it inevitable because you're the one conduit and, am I asking that question right? I'm just curious how you approach it.
Well, I don't know that I combine them because for me, I guess the best way that I explain it is that if I'm in a session with somebody that it's kind of like I feel like I have like a radio dial up here. And it's kind of like if I'm doing Reiki, it's here. If I'm doing bars, it's here. Facelift is here, body processes. They each have their own energy.
Interesting.
And I'm even kind of like I've been asking more questions lately, like, what's this little knob over here? You know, what can I do over here? What's this one? So it's like there's a whole array of these energies that are available for us, and it's just a matter of like uncovering our capacities with tuning into the different avenues of energy that are available and utilizing them to create the change that we know is possible.
Um, to pick one of the dials, Holy Fire Reiki, can you kind of give me a bit of an education about what's the baseline philosophy ideas? I mean, I know everything's kind of based in Usui, but I've heard different feedback about Holy Fire and would love to learn a little bit more about that particular modality.
Yeah, Holy Fire. So we learn all of the same, techniques and history. Like the creator of Holy Fire, who kind of first tapped into or tuned into these energies is William Rand.
Hmm.
And back in the 70s, he used to write motorcycle manuals. And so
Really?
he's like super excited to create manuals. That's his jam. So when he started to get into energy work and Reiki in particular, he was like, I'm gonna write a manual. And then like as he was beginning to look into it and write the manual, um, he would do a lot of research because there's so much information out there. As Reiki is kind of like a game of telephone sometimes where we learn
Yeah.
from a master and then we have our interpretation and then Reiki comes through us in a particular way and then we pass that on. So sometimes there can be a lot of information that's like, well, and especially when you get people involved, there's a lot of people who are like, this is the right way or the wrong way or whatever. So
Oh yeah.
the way that the manual is written is just to give the information. And so I love that. It has a lot of resources in it and a lot of places where you can learn more if you want to. There's a lot of like, reference material and things like that. Um, so you learn about, Usui Reiki, but Holy Fire is kind of like the way that the energies came through for William Rand.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's a more modern form of Reiki energy. It's just a little bit different. And the difference that I perceive with it is that, you know, what I am aware of with it is that Reiki begins to work with us on a personal level.
Hmm.
And we begin to kind of uncover how that shows up in the world through us. So, Sam, you could be a Reiki master, I can be a Reiki master, and the Reiki's going to come through us in a little bit of a different way because you're going to have your own sort of style that comes through. I'm
Yeah.
going to have my own style that comes through. It doesn't make yours right and mine wrong, or vice versa. It just is. And what's beautiful is that because of that, you may have somebody that, is going through something, and let's say it pops for them to come and see you. You're going to provide a session that's completely different from my session, and we're still doing Reiki.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's really what I find is that what I love about it is it's very empowering for you to uncover not only the history of everything, you know, and to learn the basics, but then it's like to expand on that. And it's like, okay, well, how is Reiki coming into the world through you? So for me, I love that empowerment aspect. That's another thing that I find with Access Consciousness that's so inspiring, is it's not about telling you, hey, this is how to do this. This is what's right. This is what's wrong. We ask a lot of questions, and it's for you to go into self-inquiry and for you to uncover what you know.
Is for access bars, are there levels like level 1, level 2, like in Reiki? Is that a thing, or is just really once you learn it, it's really developing, like you said, how you interpret and bring the energy through?
Well, with Access Consciousness, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different areas that you can get into. They do have, you know, the facelift, the bars, the body processes, but then there's
Okay.
also specialty classes like a specialty class. One of them is called the X-Men, and it's basically looking at things like ADD, and like,
Mm,
what is it, OCD and autism. And it's looking
interesting.
at what if these are actually, like an ability rather than a disability.
Yes.
And it's about like having some tools available in order to
Interesting.
embrace that, and have fun
Really?
with it.
That's
And
fascinating. Okay.
there's other classes too, everything from like talk to the entities. They have a lot of horse classes, conscious horse rider.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
there's a lot of different avenues that you can go into with it.
Where, just for my own personal curiosity, I'd love to just discover what that looks like. Where would someone go to get some of that information? Your
Yeah,
website or
I
access?
don't have all of the access consciousness like specialties and things on my website.
Mhm.
Because basically, to facilitate some of the different specialties, you would like, as a facilitator, go and take more of those classes in order to facilitate them.
Sure.
So you would go to accessconsciousness.com, and then you
Okay.
can find a bunch of, there's so many different things there. So they don't do it by levels. It's more just kind of like a big, like, bomb of chaos.
Sounds like.
And it's kind of like, what's fun for you?
So
And you
is
experience
there like the class that you offer here at the Reiki Center is access consciousness, correct? Access bars?
I offer at the Reiki Center. I have a couple of classes coming up. One I believe is in August, is the Access Bars class.
Okay.
And in September, I have a class that is the Access Consciousness Facelift.
Okay. When for somebody who's kind of starting on this path, what would it be a good start to kind of step in, or does it matter? Kind of like you said, what are you drawn to, and just start cherry
Yeah,
picking all the good stuff so it doesn't have to start in any one place, so to speak.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. The bars class has no prerequisites, and the same with the facelift. There's no prerequisites for either class, so you can begin with whatever feels fun for you.
So so basically I just need to express this because to me, it makes a lot of sense that your perspective of how different the energies are. I mean, a Reiki session can be incredibly relaxing for me. Kind of feel a little dopey afterwards sometimes. But your sessions with access bars for me, where it was like you turned up the volume, and
Mhm.
I felt in. I think we've done it. I've had the pleasure of being in your table a couple of times, and both times really afterwards felt like I could take on the world. Like I was like, let's go, get me off this table so I can get some stuff done. So it's really, I'm fascinated. I really want to look into it a little bit more, and I hope to step into one of your classes soon. Because, and again, I really need to think about what's blocked me from some of this, and then we may have to
There's
we may have to
that
have discussions about
resistance.
money.
Yeah, what are you avoiding choosing?
Yeah, yeah, there's something. There's something. Well, for me too, another one that has not that access bars is maybe nervous necessarily, but somatic release breath work.
Yeah.
There is
That
something uh, I have not stepped in, and I don't know why. And I think I'm supposed to, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's almost afraid of what is going to come up, and have to take a look at myself in a way that I don't want to. So to kind of get through it, but definitely necessary. Um,
But
so
I think that if I can, yeah, like I feel like those are those things. So like, when it's like, oh wow, like that's uncomfortable feeling. Like, you know, when you're just kind of like, I know there's some things there, and I know that like going through this process, it's probably going to bring a lot of those things up. The
Yeah.
thing that's so crazy to me is that a lot of times, you know, I think that we have this there's like a perception here that like, you know, energy work is all sunshine and butterflies. And the thing is that sometimes it's extremely uncomfortable.
Right.
Sometimes, you know, the things that, you know, that I've had to look at in sessions, I'm just like, oh, ooh, that's what I've been choosing. Wow. You know,
Yeah.
or, you know, you know, it can be uncomfortable. Even sometimes after leaving a session, you know, I'm just kind of like, wow, you know, I think I'm going to go home and just be with myself for a minute. I might even cry a little bit, you know, and that's okay. You know, it's sometimes as these things move through, you know, if you think about it, how much of this stuff have you stuffed down for, I don't know, years,
Years. Yeah.
decades,
What
lifetimes?
God, lifetime. What kind of tools do you provide people that kind of come in to your sessions? I know I left like a bat out of hell, just ready to get some things done and be successful. But is there any, what kind of things do you offer your clients after a session to kind of support them? As, like you said, they may have to integrate after the session on their own. So just curious what things you would recommend.
Yeah, I think that sometimes if you just have the awareness that it can show up in a lot of different ways, you know, there's sometimes that I'll leave a session and for me, you know, I just want to go home and take a nap. There's other times where I need to go cry it out in the shower, you know, and there's other times where I'm just like, I need a whole cheesecake. You know, so it just depends. You know, when you leave a session, it's really just kind of like, you know, having the awareness that this can show up in so many different ways. There's sometimes even I remember after I left I think it was my first Reiki class there, and I was like there was like I actually like I had like this sinus problem for a while, and I realized that what it was my body releasing a lot of the things that I had like you know, it was almost like there was this like clearing that needed to
Hmm.
happen here,
Interesting.
and
Yeah.
you know, in this area, and it was just like as I left that class and had that energy move through, I was like, oh, there's another one of those uncomfortable things. But I think that's the thing, is just recognizing that this can show up in a lot of different ways like that, and it doesn't you know, it's kind of really kind of going back to like just asking questions with your body, you know, what is this, what can I do with this, you know, what would it take to change this, you know, or at least have more ease with it.
So
Yeah.
when you ask those kind of questions to yourself or maybe to the universe, or is it just a matter of putting the intention of how can it get better than this, and then just being open to receiving? Or is
Yeah.
there a certain way that you have had success, certain, what am I trying to say? Habits, certain tools that have helped you kind of find those answers versus, sometimes I want to just be told, and I just tell me what to do, tell me what to do. So what's been helpful for you to kind of continue to evolve and be on that path and show up for yourself?
That's a really good point, because I think that we're kind of taught that here, you know, to look outside of ourselves
Yeah.
for the answers rather than to look within, you know. We're really not really really not really brought up to, you know, question it from an internal level, you know. It's kind of like for me, a lot of this is really that self-empowerment of trusting you, of trusting what you know, that's outside of what everybody else's projections or expectations or their judgments or whatever it is that is coming in from the outside world. It's a matter of like, you know, like for an example, money. You know, we can have all these different like things about money that we can be aware of, you know, whether it's like our parents' views about like what's possible or not possible, or money doesn't grow on trees, or, you know, this has to be difficult. But what if none of that's true? And what if you could get back to like, okay, well, what's my reality with money? You know, if I didn't have all of these points of view that I was like swimming in, you know, what kind of reality would I have? You know, if you look at a little child, you know, I look at my 4-year-old sometimes, and he doesn't have a money problem. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, he just wakes up and there's joy in his world. He's just like, what are we gonna do today? And I'm just kind of like, wow, that's the space of us. We get to choose that. And somewhere along the way, we've bought, a lot of points of view about, how things have to be difficult or how it has to look like this or that. And what if none of that's true? What if you could come back to that space of like being, like a child where it's just like you're waking up in the morning and it's like, well, how much fun can I have today?
God, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? I need a staycation so I can just do that for a week and just figure out what comes into my awareness. Because it's funny for me. My kiddos are 12 and 13, so I've got a few more years until they're out of the house. But the awareness that I lack self awareness because I've been doing and showing up for everybody else the way they've needed me to. So, like, as you're talking, like, how have I started to program my kids around the
Yeah.
idea of money specifically? Because I do think that I recognize that I sit in a lack mentality more often than not. So, yeah, asking those internal questions and kind of trying to figure out how to
Well,
get out of your own way.
I do want to say this too. I think as parents, what if we couldn't mess it up? It's like I get that our kids kind of like choose us, even with all of the weird stuff we have going on,
Yeah,
and it's we can be conscious, with what we're creating with our children, and when we begin to look at, well, I don't know if I really want to keep creating that pattern. You can choose to change it. I've had a lot of times with my teenage daughter where I've made a choice, reacted in a certain way, and then walked away. And I'm like, well, that wasn't exactly the most conscious
yeah,
choice I could have made. Like, who does this belong to? It's not mine, and then you begin to kind of like do that whole like, okay, that doesn't create what I wanted it to create. And it's a matter of like me going back up the stairs and opening up her door and being like, you know what, I could have reacted different there. And I don't really like what I chose. And can I just choose again? And a lot
I,
of times, we just move on from it like that. Because some of the stuff, that we're programmed with is just running in the background. And as we begin to get more, aware and more conscious of what is happening, it's kind of like, you can watch the chatter happening, or you
yeah,
can watch some of the patterning, and then it's like the more that I play with this stuff, the more that it kind of starts going from being like something that I realize after the fact to something I can realize more in the moment. And then it's like when you're in the moment and you're recognizing those things, that's where it's really cool, because then you're kind of like, ooh, what can I choose here? And it's like there's more of like a presence with it rather than like dropping a grenade and then walking off and then being
yeah.
like, oh, coming back and being like, yeah, sorry about that grenade. you know
Been there, done that. Yep.
yeah.
But I do think for me, as the kiddos get older, I'm aware of how of their own being they are, and I'm not their keeper. They're not mine, and that's also taken a lot of pressure off of. They don't have to do it the way I would do it. They don't have to, always show up the same way that I would. And yeah, and I truly think that I've taught them a lot of what not to do, so, and I try to own that when it happens. Same thing. Try to go back and just say, this is where I was triggered. This is what happened. This isn't, this, I'm telling you, this is not what I want you to do or how I want you to be or show up for yourself or a friend or a daughter eventually. So yeah, it's interesting though. And the idea of the self-awareness, I really, so you were the one, you didn't you did publish an article last year, something about how to ask the right questions. And there was something, didn't like,
Yeah, so I did an article for a Reiki magazine that had to do with asking questions, and it really is about where we go into self-doubt.
mhm,
When I first was started practicing Reiki, I took the classes, and then after that, I started to go to these Reiki trades that they would have with all the practitioners. And a lot of the other practitioners in the room would kind of be like, "Oh, I'm seeing this, and I'm getting, intuitive, feedback about this." And for me, I was like, maybe I see something. Do I see something? You know, I was really like second guessing a lot of the things. And I was making myself really wrong for it. Fast forward a little bit, I started to have, you know, more practice and was with a client one day, and what kept coming up throughout the session in my head was this little picture of prairie dogs. And they would like pop up and then like look around and then like go back down. And I'm like, this is so freaking weird. You know, and by the end of the session, it happened so much as a visual that I was like, I felt like this almost like nudge of like, go ahead and tell her you're seeing prairie dogs.
Okay.
And when I did, she started crying, and I was like, oh God, what did I do? You know? But she was like, that's so amazing, because as she was growing up as a kid, her and her dad used to go prairie dog hunting, where they would go and look for
Oh,
prairie dogs. And she said that her dad had died, and that was something that she always loved that they did together.
oh, wow.
I was like, wow, I was so blown away. I was like, this is okay, and now I get it. And so I think that it's just kind of like once you get that self-acknowledgement of like, okay, I'm seeing this and I'm getting like validation for it, then you begin to like have that muscle strengthened a little bit.
Yeah.
And the more that you're trusting what's coming, you know, in your mind's eye, or however it shows up for you. Sometimes people see things, sometimes people feel things, you know, in their body.
Mhm.
And sometimes it can show up in, well, many different ways. It really depends on how your body works. Um, but it's just interesting that the more that I trusted myself and had these things pop into my head and conveyed them, that muscle grew. And
Mm,
now I'm just to the point of where it's just like, it's weird, I'm gonna say it anyway. You know, and even if it's, you know, it's just whatever it is, if I get that it's going to be a contribution, and I'll sense and feel it in my body actually. As I practice this more, like if it's something from my guides, I'll almost like have this like sensation over here. If it's something as far as like channeling goes, I'll kind of like sense it on top of my head.
interesting.
My crown chakra will feel really hot. If my ancestors or the client's ancestors are working with me, then I'll feel it in my heart. My heart will
Interesting.
kind of like light up, and I'll feel more heat there. So
So
these
just
are,
over time, you've been able to qualify how that oh, that's fascinating. Okay, cool.
yeah. Yeah, so it'll kind of give me more information and speak to me in a way that I can understand. So it's like when I begin to feel like my heart warm up, you know, and I feel like that expansion there, and then it's kind of like, oh, I'm like, oh, there's an ancestor here, you know, and then
That's
I kind
really
of
cool.
check in with it. Okay, like who's here? You know, who's in the room?
So
Um,
how long have you considered yourself to be channeling? When did that part of your journey really start to open up compared to everything else?
Yeah, I think it just came with practice. In particular, um, just the more that I began to trust myself, you know, the things like the prairie dogs that would come through, and I would just begin to, you know, convey that to people. It started to kind of work through me in a different way, where as I was talking to people, things kind of like would begin to kind of come through. So there's that aspect of it. What I've been looking at recently with all of it is I'm kind of like, am I channeling something, or is this like just another space of me? You know,
Interesting. Okay.
I kind of get that we are multidimensional, and that
Mhm.
this is just one reality that in this moment is screaming a little louder than the others.
Oh, just oh, okay. All right. Oh my God. I'm
And
gonna have to sit with that one. Okay.
yeah, and I've been playing with this lately of like, you know, like if, because it's like, okay, time is not real, right? And so it's like, what if, you know, all of these things are actually happening all at the same time, and we're able to access so much more of ourselves than we ever thought was possible. So I really want to open up personally to like what else is possible here for us and our abilities. Lately I've been looking at you know, if you think about back in the day, we would think that somebody could only run a mile in a certain amount of time, and that was the fastest for that time. Now everybody can run the mile in that amount of time. It's not anything extraordinary. And so I'm kind of like, our abilities really don't have this cap on them that we've been, that we've maybe bought that they do. And what if we could actually exponentialize what is possible with our abilities and these
So
sort of
funny.
things?
I feel like somebody's just like, hey, pay attention to what she's saying. Like, okay, okay, I'm paying attention. Um, yeah, I don't even know where to go because that just kind of blew my mind a little. I've got to sit with that. So thank you
Yeah.
for that. I think one thing that I don't know exactly how to ask this question without sharing way too much, probably, but um, sobriety is something that I personally struggle with. Um, and I, but yet it's the pattern that I continue to choose. And where do you stand about the idea of how information comes in? Because I had a conversation with a local psychic the other day that said, she's a smoker and she thinks that marijuana opens her up versus closing off, versus alcohol versus whatever your vice may be. Um, I'm just curious because I notice that I'm in this pattern of as soon as I take a drink, I've already shut off the connection,
Hmm.
and so it's interesting. So I'm just curious about what your thoughts are
Yeah.
on that.
What I find with all of it is really, again, comes kind of back to like, being in the question of what works for you and your body.
Mhm.
There, for some people, they can go and have a drink and then move on with life. For myself, that wasn't, exactly the case. And it was also part of my journey. So it's kind
Mhm.
of like with all of it, like, what if we didn't have to make any of it right or wrong? And just, I guess it's like, there's that. There's also like, what what are you aware of with, what it creates in your world?
Mhm.
Like, there's, because for me, what I get with it is that personally, there's a vibration that shifts.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, and so for me, where I'm at today, it just doesn't work, and I wouldn't choose it. And it's again, not to make it right or wrong. That's just from my perspective and my interesting point of view where I'm sitting with it.
sure,
I
sure.
know what works and what doesn't work for me, and what it's created, and what creates greater. And yet I also acknowledge and love the fact that it was on my journey, because it's helped me to today, when I work with somebody who's in addiction, I know exactly where they're at and I know where the door is
Yeah,
and I can show
yeah,
you, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I love that. I love that way that I can connect with people who are in the trenches of addiction, in a way that, maybe other people don't, haven't explored,
Right.
um, you know. So I don't know. It's one of those things of, what if it wasn't a right or wrong and it was just a choice? And what can you choose that's going to create the future that you want to create?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for taking me through that because there's I found some ease in my body as you were talking about, again, not putting the label of right or wrong, just, really finding the vibration you want to sit in and how does this serve you or not? And
Hmm.
can you be honest with yourself? And if you can be honest with yourself, can you take the appropriate action to move
Yeah,
in the direction that you want to move in? So thank you for that.
yeah.
This has been awesome. I appreciate this so much. Is there anything else that you want anybody to know about you, your practice, what you bring to the table before we say goodbye?
Yeah, there was one thing that kind of popped, and it's, you know, we can look around at this reality and kind of like look at all the things that are working or not working. And a lot of people can sit back and go into the trauma and drama of it or get caught up in all of it. What I want to invite everybody to is a space where we can create what's beyond it, so it's like, what do you know that's possible that nobody else knows is possible? And what if you could choose it? It's about being a leader, and a leader is somebody that chooses something different, even if it's uncomfortable. It's not choosing what everybody else is choosing. It's a matter of like, you wake up in the morning and everybody else is like, oh, and you're just like, I'm happy. Hi, how's it going? Um, Everybody can kind of look at you and there's a lot of judgment that you might receive because you're happy and everybody else is like, we need to be sad here.
Yeah.
But what if you choose it anyways? What if you are actually the invitation to something that's greater and possible here that you know? So I really want to invite everybody to that space of like, if you got out of all the other points of view that you might have bought, from others as you're growing up, or even like in the time that you are in now, and you just got to that space of like, what do I know? You know? And what's possible here, what can I choose, how does it get better than this, um it really is like I want everybody to get that, like, to create what's beyond this reality, we have to choose it and we have to be it. And it's like now's the time, you know, like turn up those muscles,
Right.
it's about like, those things that we thought weren't possible, running the mile back in the day, now everybody can do it. What if there aren't those limitations and we can actually move beyond into something that we never, thought was available? So what if we, to create beyond this reality, we've got to choose beyond it. So,
I
um,
think you've given me so much to think about today. Thank you so much.
cool. Yeah, so and if people want to find me, I have a couple classes coming up at the Reiki Center later on in the fall. But you can find a full listing of my classes on my website, brightlifelove.com. And then you can also just Google Katharine Daniels and Access Consciousness, and you'll find me there too.
Excellent. And I'm just throwing this out there. Everybody needs some of you in their life. I really, even over the last few years, even though we're not terribly close, I've witnessed part of your evolution. And it's been very cool to see. And I thank you for all the things you've given me to think about and step into and choose different. So I really
Yes.
appreciate your time today, Catherine. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
Have a good day.
yeah, thank you.
All right.